All right. So as we continue the conversation, I think one of the questions that we've had, because I, as a pastor, have said that I believe that systemic racism is a real thing. And I know that that as a statement has a tendency to rub some people the wrong way because of the implication, or maybe because of the what somebody might think I'm trying to communicate. And language really matters here. So I want to have a discussion about what do we mean by systemic racism? What do we mean by white privilege? What do we mean by these things? So as we kind of talk about where we land, people know what we're for and what we really think. And I think a good way to start, Tim Keller, you guys know, pastor in New York, just an exceptional theologian, a guy we would certainly read a lot of and support. Here's the definition he uses, which I think it resonates with me and hopefully with you guys. He says that systemic racism is this: it's a system that excludes or marginalizes people on the basis of race, even though, and I think this is the important part, even though most individuals in the system don't even realize they're doing it or realize that it's happening. And I think that's important because when I say systemic racism, I think what most people assume is that I'm calling them racist. And I think it's important to know that when we talk about systemic race issues or even white benefit or privilege or those kinds of things, what we're not saying is that individuals are acting in racist ways. I mean, some individuals act in racist ways. We know that's true, right? But the argument is just because an individual acts that way doesn't mean that the whole system is that way. And my argument is that I think that we see systems not because people are acting as racist individuals, but systems that kind of trend towards causing more difficulties for folks that aren't Caucasian. So I guess what are your thoughts about that?
Well, the pause, of course, is because
Because it's tricky.
it's a big discussion. It's a big topic, and so I think I'll just put it out there right now. Anytime during this discussion that we're about to have, anybody that's watching, if they see us take a moment of pause, it's because that's something we should think. Right? We're very quick to speak. We're not very quick to really stop and think and allow to process things. We just kind of go with our go-to response. My first gut response to that definition by Tim Keller is, one, I would agree with it. Two, anyone that might feel like still don't agree with it, this is where I land with all of this discussion. I only know what I know. We've said that. I am a born and raised Iowa Vinton kid, right? I mean, I know what I know. I've visited places, but I only know what I know. And so when I draw this really, like, if I want to draw this line in the sand of saying this does not happen, I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what it's like to live in other parts of our country. I don't know what it's like to grow up in I know what it's like to grow up with both my parents in a good Christian home, in a community that is a very safe community. I know what that's like, right? I don't know what it's like to grow up in a community where, there's high crime rate and, you're hearing sirens all night long, or you're having to deal with government officials that don't want to listen to what I'll actually share this. I'll just give you this story, and whether it fits or not, it just made me laugh. I was actually talking to Mark, Johnson before the second service, and we were talking about law enforcement stuff, and I was listening to a black pastor, and I can't remember what his name was, but he made this comment where he said, he was talking to another pastor, and he said to that pastor, "You have probably never been pulled over and ever had the thought enter your mind, you better be respectful, because you might not walk away from this." He's like, you've probably never had that thought, right? That's what he's like, I've had that thought, like, don't be stupid, because you want to go home, right? Like, don't even raise your voice. Just, don't do that. He's like, you probably, and I said, when I heard that, I said, you know what, that's funny. I never had that. And so I shared with Mark, I actually got pulled over once in Wisconsin. And they pulled me over, and the cop's like, would you get out of the car, please? And normally I've never been asked this. I was like, okay, didn't think nothing about it. Got out. Next thing out of his mouth, would you lift up your shirt and turn around, please? And in my brain, I'm like, dude, what the world, right? Never thought twice about it. I was like, sure, yeah, of course I got a weapon. But then I thought about that. I'm like, I wonder how somebody else might perceive that exact same moment. Like I was like, yeah, no problem, dude. But I only know what I know. I never had a moment of like, oh, this could get touchy really fast. Like I never had that thought. So just as an example of you only know what you know.
Well, and I think it's important too. Like we're like, well, we only know what we know in Vinton. I think we all know Malia, right? And she was brave enough to share, I think, her own thoughts about this. And she's from Vinton. She's grown up here. She's raised biracial children here. And even in this safe town where we don't experience these kinds of things, her experience has been like it's not been as demonstrative maybe as people in other parts of the world. But I mean, let's not be so I'm not saying you're doing this, but let's not be so quick to dismiss even the experience of people in this city. You're right. We only know what we know, and not only is that our town, but that's our gender, it's our race, it's our friends, it's our family experience. Like we are so limited.
Well, that's the example. You bring up Malia. That's somebody might have read that and been like, oh, that's not Vinton. Well, that's your take of Vinton because you know what you know.
Yeah. Here's what I know. Well, here's what I know about Malia. Right. She is painfully honest, right, and she is full of integrity and humility. And the Holy Spirit and the grace of God. Like not that she's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. This is really awkward for her because she's running the camera. People don't know that, but
you can put the sign down telling him what to say.
but so when Malia says, "Hey, look, this is an experience that I've had," while I might be quick to want to dismiss that, I've got to give that my full attention because I give other things that Malia says to me my full attention. When she says, "Hey, I think I think." These other things, and here's what I'm learning in the Word, and here's what's happening, and here's Matt, how I think you could be more gentle with the way you approach the congregation, or whatever it is that she gives me. I'm like, I want to give that full attention. This too, right? So we only know our lens. We have to really be willing to understand that we don't have the same experiences that other people have.
Talking about systemic racism, and as I was listening and thinking, would this be maybe an example of systemic discrimination? I was thinking of what I'm reading, probably on Facebook, that YouTube pulled a video because it was hate speech. And the video was a video of a person who started a transgender operation and nothing worked, and now all he's doing is talking about how bad the whole deal was. Okay, discrimination. That video was pulled. I'm told that Facebook discriminates against the conservatives on conservative issues. So there is systemic discrimination out there that we can face also.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Like we know what maybe not to the same extent, but we also feel that from a conservative Christian evangelical position, we know and acutely feel when people stack the deck against us, so to speak. And I think it's taking that same feeling and understanding, it's this empathy, right? And saying, you know what? Other people have that experience not because of their evangelicalism, not because of their conservative Christian viewpoints, but because of their race. And I think that's a really good way to frame it, Lowell. I think, the thing is, when we talk about systemic race issues, again, to be clear, we're not calling people racist, but saying that the system is more easily navigated by, or it's simpler for some people than it is for others. That's for the longest time. And we could still argue maybe legitimately, this is a different video for us to have, but for the longest time, the system was more stacked for men than it was for women, right? And so there have been a long history of, the right to vote and the right to, hold these different positions. And we would say that's a good thing, right? But we recognize the system was skewed this way. And so when we talk about systemic racism, it's the same thing. We're not saying that everybody that participated in that broken system was sexist, right? Sometimes people didn't even know that they were part of that system. It's the same thing with the systemic race issue, right? Not everybody knows that it's a racist system. Not everybody's wanting to act that way. We're just kind of stuck in this system. But the reality is, I have benefit to being born as who I was born as. I had a clear benefit, right? Like whether you want to call it white privilege or call it white benefit, and that's another thing we have to define, right? Because I'm not guilty because I was born as me. I don't owe anybody anything because I was born as me. I don't have to feel bad about who I am. But I do have to recognize that for me, because I'm white, because my parents were white, the odds that I was going to be born into a home that had two parents, right? A mom and a dad that love and care for me and were home. The odds that we were going to be born into a family with health insurance, that we were going to be born into a community that was safer, that I was going to be born into a community that had, because it was safer, maybe better schools. There is all kind of benefit to me being born me. Benefit that I didn't earn or deserve because I worked hard. It just happened to me when I was born. And by and large, well, that's not true for everybody. I know plenty of stories of white folks, Caucasian people that were born without those benefits. And there's plenty of stories about people of color that are born with those benefits. But by and large, right, statistically, more white people are born into this benefit than people of color. And so that's all we mean when we say white privilege or white benefit, is that we have this benefit that not everybody has. And again, there's nothing that I should feel guilty about. And it doesn't negate the fact that I had to work hard to get where I got. And it doesn't negate the fact that other people that don't have the same benefits will have to work hard to get to where they want to be. But it's just a reality that kind of feeds these systemic issues, like schools that don't meet expectations, and neighborhoods that aren't safe sometimes, and some of those other things with healthcare and insurance and whatever it might be. I think we have to recognize what we're really saying. We're not saying people with white privilege or benefit that they've done something wrong, or that they should feel bad about who they are, or feel guilty, or feel like they have to make up for some past thing. No, that's not it at all. It's just recognizing that, you know what? Not everybody had the same benefits I had. And systemically, most of the time, those benefits are found more often in the white community.
This systemic racism, and I shared with the brothers here, I looked it up, and originally it was institutional racism, and to me that gels better in my mind. I can get a handle on it. So then I think of an institution, and I came out of a banking background and economics and so forth. So in that, okay, the institution is racist? No, it's immoral. Immoral. It's not. It's neither. It's the people behind it is what I want to say. Who's putting the racist policies or rules into effect that makes the institution racist? The institution itself is just it's played out by people. So it does boil down to people are racist by putting into the institution rules, policies, and understandings that turn out to be racist. Does that make sense?
I think it does. And I think this is one of the issues that we have, why people get so riled up about this conversation. Because in our culture, everything's been hijacked, right? So when we talk about systemic racism, all of the sudden, what people hear me, when I say I believe systemic racism is real, what they hear me oftentimes saying are things I'm not saying, right?
Correct.
They might hear me saying things, well, then I think conservative politicians are wrong. And I think we have to be left-leaning. And I think we have to go this direction. No. Time out. We can have all the political discussion in the world, because I would argue that some of the more left policies have ended up causing or continuing some of those systemic issues than they have helped. They were designed to help, but they haven't. They've made those things worse. So this isn't a political discussion necessarily, as much as it's a just because we think something is true or just because we believe something is true, you know, we can't just paint it all with this big brush, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I just think it's difficult.
So one of the thoughts that's just circling around is also when we use the word racist or racism, I think a lot of times we have to check, I have to check it, my attitude at the door. Because when you hear those words, the first thing you do is you picture hate-filled racism, right? Like you use the word racist, now all of a sudden I'm going to equality, like that equals hatred, right? So that's where then the defense mechanism kicks in, because it's like, I know I don't hate anybody, right? Or if I feel like I'm being attacked, then this is like, then my defense kicks in. I think what we need to clarify for anybody that's listening, and just for us also as we discuss this as elders and also as a church, is when we use the word racism, I think what we're talking more about is ignorance-based racism, meaning it's not happening because people are legitimately sitting there saying, I want to hate people. It's just an ignorance of decisions made based on, again, not knowing. You only know what you know, right? It's like, it's the same thing for myself is when you talk racism, you know, I instantly want to defend myself because like, no, I'm not racist. But is there possible that I can have racist or racial ideas, again, not based on hatred, not based on you're not worthy or not, but an ignorance of not knowing something, or maybe coming to believe something that I didn't know? You know what I'm saying? Like, so sometimes I think we have to be careful with that, because anybody that's listening, if you hear these words, they might be those trigger words that get you all worked up. And you think that we're talking about institutional problem of racism because people hate people. Like there are people sitting behind a door right now figuring out how can we hate these people, right? Exactly. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about decisions that are made based on ignorance of like not knowing different or just assuming certain things. So I think that has to be clarified. So anybody that gets like all worked up on these words, it's not a hate-based thing, right? Again, I go back to my own experiences. I've had no major issues, but I remember very vividly, you know, my world opening up the first time I went to college in Kansas. And I told Matt this, you know, I walk up my dorm and I'm like the only white guy, right? Needless to say, my ignorance like really got, I mean, he's like, okay, you know, this is a whole new world, right? You start learning I started learning ignorant thoughts that I had. Didn't make me stupid. It didn't make me wrong. It didn't make me hateful or anything. You only know what you know, and you base your decisions and your conclusions off that. So that's my thought as I was kind of hearing these words. Is like, I wonder how many people were hearing racism or racist, and they're like, oh, getting all frustrated as you're hearing that because like, I don't hate anybody. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how an institution can make decisions that are based more in an ignorance of what is happening versus we are going to hate on them. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
The one thing I'd like to talk about is, you know, we talk about, you know, you don't know what you don't know, you know, and one of the things that, you know, comes to my mind is the phrase, you know, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. You know, you don't know, you know, we don't know what it's like to be in a different neighborhood or a different part of the country or a different part of the world. You know, I've got a person that's very dear to my heart that teaches in a very urban school, which is the majority of it is minorities, you know, and he's struggling with how to be able to, you know, they push mentorship on these teachers and stuff because most of the kids don't have no parents or one parent, you know, some of the stuff we talk about. And it's not that they're racist, it's just they're born where they're born at. You know, they didn't get a choice in that, you know, and how he trying to mentor them and speak to them and reach out to them, which is what the church should be doing too, but from a place of white privilege. You know, he's you know, he's got a good education. You know, his wife has a good education. You know, they're doing well. You know, how can I help these kids that are in a spot that they had no choice of being in? You know, and so, you know, that's what makes me think. You know, like, okay, walk a mile in their shoes and, you know, and put myself in there. You know, and it's not because nobody's racist, you know, it's just they're in the spot that they're in, you know, and why should the church care about that? You know, that's where, you know, we biblically have a role in not trying to solve world thing, but to the schools that are struggling, like we said, you know, how can we help them? how can we be mentors, or what can we do, biblically based, as brothers and sisters, to reach out and help these people. I don't know what I want to say, get a good step in life, but to get a boost or whatever, and and the other part that's a little bit more personal to me, when I was a youth leader, that was a big thing of taking kids to like the cities, to Memphis, to Dallas, to whatever, just to see, to try and get a glimpse to walk in somebody else's shoes, just to, to experience it, so that they can grow and understand, and maybe in their own lives have a impact on how and to improve, how to, not necessarily fix, but how to identify some of this, I can't say the word, systemic racism or whatever that goes on, and it's not just one race, but, like I said, you alluded to it earlier, it was, with male, female, yada, it was all systemic, so.
Yeah. I think I think too. Going back to that, right? It's the issue is not that there's any fault for where we are, but there is something that I think we need to understand. One of the things that we naturally do is we tend to, and this is human nature. This isn't black, white, male, female, Jew, Greek. I mean, this is none of that, right? This is just human nature. We tend to judge people if they aren't where we are, right? Christians do that to each other all the time, right? More mature Christians, less mature Christians. We get judgy when people aren't where we are. And I think it's incumbent on us to remember, with this issue of white benefit or white privilege, we want to be careful about judging people that haven't gotten to where I personally have gotten. Right? I worked hard. Somebody else might work hard that had different advantages or different situations. But there's the understanding that we have to be careful not to judge people for not being where we are. And it becomes really easy to do that. It happens in our Christian faith. I think it happens in race as well. And we just want to be cautious, and we do that with our kids, right? We judge where they are and where other people's kids are. It's just a bad game to play. And so if we have a different perspective, that'll be right. But you're talking about the Christian response, right? Like how do we step in and help and like protests, those things that are peaceful, fine, whatever. But I think as a church, what do we do as a church? I think it's what we always should have been doing as a church. The things that we should be good at and the things that we should do regularly are things that will help combat systemic racism where it exists, or any of those issues where they exist. Like, for example, right? Like we know that as Christians, we are to come alongside those that are fatherless. White, black, brown, doesn't matter. We are to come alongside those that are fatherless. We are to provide male leadership and role modeling and where it's allowed and be plugged in there. And so where we see that, the church should naturally be dealing with that, right? We know that our schools shouldn't go without, right? Whether there's state funding or not, our schools shouldn't go without. Whether the property tax values are high or not, our schools shouldn't go without. The church should be about pouring love onto that school. So coming alongside teachers to volunteer to do things, financial support where it's necessary, again, tutoring, and like the church, if we're doing our job and sharing the gospel and being the hands and feet of Christ, should be stepping into that role. And so whether the kids there are again black, white, brown, whatever, it doesn't matter. Right? Because the church is stepping in to meet a need for everybody that would be there. And in doing those things, if the church acted like the church in those instances, we would start to push back against those systems that are broken. We can't ever fix it. The world is broken, right? We need Jesus for that. He's going to come and he's going to establish his rule. We just got done talking about that in Revelation. But our job is to bring his kingdom the best way we can and share the gospel. And if we do that well, that pushes back against systemic race issues.
Amen.
David, I see you flipping through your Bible, man. What do you got?
I knew you were going to ask me, and I was sitting there like, okay, Matt, keep stretching because I haven't found it yet. So I have two things to kind of speak into, as we talk about white privilege. And again, we've had conversation, and again, that's one of those words that can kind of become a trigger word for me because, you hear a word and you instantly kind of jump at it like, what do you mean by that? Not you personally, but what do people mean by that? And,
I don't know. I think the first time I said
first
it,
did, yeah, we did. We're like,
you did. You're like, well, time out. I don't like it. Like we've had this dialogue.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's a great thing for people to know, right? Like we don't all agree 100% on all of these issues, right? We are navigating in unity because unity matters. We're trying to navigate these things for the benefit of the church and to bring the gospel and to shed light. And so we don't always have to agree on everything 100%. And so, this is, we had not a heated conversation. But I mean, we didn't, when we started, we weren't seeing things the same way.
No, not by any means. And it was good conversation. So here's the thing, the two things I want to share about, kind of this white privilege or benefit. Let's just look at it that way. Hopefully anybody that's watching this, and especially if you were born in America, do you not realize that you also have American benefit?
Oh, yeah.
Meaning you didn't choose to be born here.
Yeah.
Right. We didn't. None of us got the choice. None of us got the ability to say that's the country I want to grow up in. Right. So we were automatically, if you look at this at a global, not take race out, just a global view, we have a benefit that the majority of the world does not have because we got to be born in this country. Now that comes with responsibility, right? Jesus says, those that have been given much, you have a higher responsibility now. Right, so it doesn't take away responsibility, but none of us can brag about our American privilege or American benefit. We didn't choose to be born here. And this is biblical. This is biblical because in Acts, this is Acts 17, Paul says this. He says, from one man, he made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth. So again, that takes care of the whole unity of humanity, right? God made us. We all came from one man. But then it says, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live, right? So again, none of us chose the benefits that we were born into, whether it's based on our race or based on even location. I have benefits instantaneously afforded to me being born in this country than the majority of the world does not have. Instantaneously. And I think we can agree with that. So that's kind of what we're talking about, right? I don't feel guilty for being born in this country. I'm very thankful that God chose to let me be born in this country. I love this country, but I didn't choose it. It was a benefit to me based on the grace of God. Now, what does that mean? That means then, based on the benefits God has given to me, I have a responsibility in which to show love, compassion, and mercy to those that are born into different situations. This is why we are called to love on those. And this is why we see missions. This is why we look at other places of the world and say, oh, they are in need. So we're going to go and take the blessing in which God has given to us, and we are going to, not out of guilt, but out of love, out of abundance of saying God has blessed me, now I am going to bless him. This is actually one of our core values. We are not we're not containers of the gospel, we're conduits of it, right? The blessings in which God gives us based on our benefit, we then allow God to flow through us to help those that are in a different place than us. So that's kind of a place where my mind has kind of been going when it comes to when you talk about the position that I have, that I didn't earn it. I think we need to clarify everything that's been said. It doesn't mean we need to feel guilty for it. I don't need to feel guilty for the benefit I have as an American because I know other people in other parts of the world don't have it. It's not a guilt-driven thing. And I think we need to understand that. There are people that want to tell us we need to feel guilty. Right? Let's just call it what it is. There are some voices that say, feel guilty for your position. We aren't saying that.
We would reject that.
I would reject that because again, this is God chose, God chose where he places people. But that doesn't change our responsibility based on where he has placed us. Right? That's the thing where we as the church, again, we can't reject the entire idea because we don't like how it's being presented by certain voices. So again, it's not a guilt-driven thing. I was trying to find it also, but I couldn't. But it's in Scripture. Scripture tells the rich to mourn over their blessed place and for the poor to rejoice in there. So again, God again, that morning where he says, hey, rich people, don't get all stuff, like, hey, we're so great. That's what he's basically saying is don't walk around saying, I'm so blessed, my life's so perfect, because Jesus was like, don't be arrogant in the place of blessing that I have given you. Because Jesus said, how hard is it for the rich to find salvation? Because we focus more on our position of blessed, and then you see why the gospel, even just going to a gospel, we see the gospel exploding in other places of the world where people have nothing, right? Because they don't have this position that they're trying to hold on to. They're looking, so that's kind of where my mind was going is this idea of privilege. Yeah, I'm privileged. I was born in the greatest country that's ever been on this planet, in my opinion. I didn't decide that. That's a benefit God gave me. Thank you. I mean, I can say that with all honesty. Thank you. But it comes with responsibility. So.
Yeah. Not guilt, but action.
Not guilt, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about responsibility, like what is our responsibility? What is it that we can be doing now? What should we be doing? And there's a number of things, but we're in a community that we don't see a lot of. What we see on TV is not the reality of what we see going on in our community. Thank goodness, but just some. I think one of the most important things we can do is to get down on our knees and pray. I mean, God needs to heal our country. He needs to heal our people, and He needs to give us wisdom into what we need to be doing as Christians. And all of the things that we've talked about where we're helping other people around the world. I mean, even I think about our mission team and the money that we give to missionaries and to, Dave and I have been to Nicaragua, Guatemala. I forget because I was at Nicaragua also. But you see the kids there that are underprivileged and all sorts of things like that. So I mean, there are things that we're doing as a body of believers in the church right now in helping underprivileged people. But when we're talking about racism and those sorts of things, I think, like I say, the most important thing that we can do right now is prayer, whether it be individually or corporately or as a community or whatever. We need to gather together as believers and ask for God's help.
Yep. And absolutely, we need God's help. We need the guidance of the Spirit. All of us do. We need to be in conversation with God our Father about how we go through this. I'm in a situation all of a sudden, or a thought comes in my mind. We need to be in communication. And the only other point, I said, don't feel guilty. And the other part, don't be ashamed of where we were at. Has nothing to, there's no need to be ashamed. But the Christian response is, how can we help improve it for somebody else? What can we do to improve? How can we help other people? We talked about outreach, stuff like that, and and there's times when we need to say something. We just can't stay quiet all the time. There's times when we need to be vocal about racism or all the gamut of stuff that goes on in our broken world today. It's like. I think we just, we're, like I said, we're blessed to be where we're at. But, and the other thing I just want to bring up too is humility. I'm proud to be an American. Absolutely, I'm proud to be an American. But when, the aspect of humility is in there too. Christ calls us to be humble. This bring the part of humility along and not haughtiness or arrogance or anything else because, of where I'm at. That's, the other part that, that mixes in with the racism word is people get that way. We're a broken world. It's easy to get arrogant. It's easy to get haughty or whatever. But, the Christian response is, what can we do to help? And to approach with humility and guidance of the Lord.
Yeah, I always appreciate when we can use the word haughty in a conversation. Because Psalms are full of the word haughty and people are like, what? But you're right. Humility is key. And I think as we kind of wrap this up, and here's what I would say to people that are watching or listening is, if you've got questions, ask us. right? If you've got questions about something we said that you want to clarify, questions about a position that we have that you just, or even just some conversation where you want to say, hey, I'm not sure I agree and here's why. Great. Let's have those conversations, but let's have them with that humility, right? Let's not be full of pride. Let's be humble as we talk about those. And I think we'll get so much further in that regard, because I think God is so clear. He treats the unity of the church with utmost importance. Unity matters. That's why we're having these conversations, because we want to maintain the unity of the church as we navigate this. And so that matters. Talk to us, bring the questions, to any of us. And for those that already have, we're so grateful that you did, so that we could have these conversations and really dig deeper in this. And it's just important stuff.
I was just going to say, talking about unity brings to mind Psalm 133, and in the end it says, where blessing is, there is unity. So unity, the blessing comes through unity. We need to be unified so that we can get the full blessing of the Lord through all of this.
Yeah, it's a good word, good place to end. Thank you guys for the time to come sit together. Thanks to Malia for kind of recording, editing the videos, throwing those out. And thank you guys for just tuning in with us and listening and tracking along, fighting for unity, fighting for the gospel and the kingdom, because all of that just matters a great deal. So thanks very much.
Amen.